After 30 years, we've finally found the missing star from Gimme a Break. While her co-stars stayed in Hollywood, she chose to vanish without a trace. No social media, no public appearances, not even a forwarding address. Now, shocking new details reveal why she ran away from fame and where she's been hiding all this time. What drove this beloved TV icon to completely erase herself from public life? The answer will break your heart. Nell Carter was born as Nell Ruth Hardy on September 13, 1948, in Birmingham, Alabama. She was the fifth of 9 children, raised in a city divided by racism and poverty. But inside her home, there was music, lots of it. Her family was poor, but their house was always alive with sound, and young Nell would sing for her siblings like she was already on stage. Her voice had depth, power, and soul, even before she knew what any of that meant. That voice would one day make her famous, but in those early years, it was just her way of coping with a world that already felt broken. At just 2 years old, Nell saw something no child should ever have to witness. Her father, Horace Hardy, an Army sergeant, stepped on a live wire near their home and was electrocuted. Nell saw it happen. That moment never left her. It was the kind of trauma that carves itself into your bones, and for the rest of her life, Nell carried the weight of that memory. Losing her father meant her mother had to raise 9 kids alone, and it meant Nell had to grow up fast, faster than any child should. But even through all that, her voice never stopped. By the time she was in elementary school, she was already turning heads at church with her singing. People would stop and listen. She joined a gospel radio show called The Y Teens, where Birmingham first got a taste of what Nell could do. In high school, she started performing in clubs, sometimes in places she wasn't even allowed to be. She'd lie to her mother, saying she was going to a movie, and instead sneak off to sing in smoky bars and coffee houses. It wasn't just gospel anymore. She was learning jazz, R&B, and finding her own sound. She soaked up records from Dinah Washington, B.B. King, and even Elvis Presley. Her music taste was wide, her style flexible, and her passion unstoppable. But the summer of 1965 changed everything. After a performance one night, Nell accepted a ride home from someone she knew. It was supposed to be safe. Instead, he pulled the car over, held her at gunpoint, dragged her into the woods, and assaulted her. She was just 16. She came home in shock, unable to speak about what had happened. Then, weeks later, she found out she was pregnant. In a time when people didn't talk about these things, especially in the Black community and especially in the South, her family stayed silent. The police were never called. Nell pretended her baby was the result of a marriage that never happened, and her brother Bernard helped her keep that secret. But not everyone was kind. Her mother's reaction was cold, even cruel. When Nell told her what had happened, she didn't get a hug. She didn't get love. She got blame. Her mother called her names that cut deep. Names no child should hear from the person who's supposed to protect them. Nell asked herself over and over, what did I do? Am I a slut? That pain never really left her. It was a wound that never healed, and it bled into every relationship she had after that. When her daughter Tracy was born in 1966, Nell was overwhelmed. She was still just a teenager, trying to find her way through the darkness. Eventually, she sent Tracy to live with her sister Willie, who had always been her source of comfort. Willie had been the one to tell her they'd survive. Bernard had told her not to lose faith. But her mother's words stayed loudest in her mind. That rejection haunted her. And even as her career began to rise, Nell kept carrying that pain with her through the Broadway lights, the TV fame, the awards, and applause. When Nell Carter boarded that bus to New York in 1967, she wasn't just chasing a dream. She was running from a nightmare. She packed her bags, joined a small theater group called the Renaissance Ensemble, and left for New York City. But she didn't just want a new career, she wanted a new identity. So she dropped her last name, Hardy, and became Nell Carter. That name would soon echo through Broadway theaters, but at the time, she was just a small woman with a big voice and a dream to survive. In those early years, she scraped by performing in coffee houses and nightclubs. She wasn't a star yet, far from it, but she was magnetic. At places like the Village Gate and Reno Sweeney, People started to remember her. Her size didn't matter. The moment she opened her mouth, rooms fell silent. She had this raw, unpolished power. Every song felt like a confession. That little club on 13th Street with its checkerboard stage and neon palm tree became her unofficial training ground. She sang alongside performers who would later become legends. But back then, they were all just hustling, just trying to get noticed. It wasn't until 1971 that she got her first real break, though it didn't last long. A rock musical called Soon opened and closed within 3 days, but it put her on stage with Richard Gere and Barry Bostwick. And more importantly, it put her name on a Broadway playbill. From there, she kept moving. She jumped from one project to another. Some flops, some promising. She played in Dude, helped with musical direction for feminist plays, even acted alongside Bette Davis in a show that never made it to Broadway. The spotlight kept missing her, but she kept going anyway. Then came 1978. Ain't Misbehavin' hit Broadway like a freight train, and Nell Carter was its engine. Her voice, unmistakable, sharp as a blade, and smooth as silk, was the heartbeat of the show. Critics couldn't stop talking about her. She won every major theater award for her performance. And when NBC turned the play into a televised event, in 1982, she added an Emmy to the pile. After years of fighting to be seen, she had finally arrived. And this time, the world couldn't look away. But what made her unforgettable wasn't just the awards or the applause. It was that voice. It wasn't conventionally pretty. It was gritty, bold, and full of emotion. It came from gospel, from jazz, from pain, from joy. It came from all the music she grew up with. Dinah Washington, Elvis, Doris Day, Streisand, and somehow she turned it into something entirely her own. Her voice could swing, shout, weep, or whisper, often all in the same song. She didn't just sing, she told stories. And when she did, you believed every word. When Gimme a Break first aired in 1981, it made history. Back then, it was rare to see a black woman leading a primetime show on a major network. But Nell Carter wasn't just any character. She was the heart of the show. Her role as Nell Harper wasn't built on stereotypes or background filler. She was the one holding the family together, making the big decisions, and bringing real emotion and humor to every scene. The show wasn't afraid to show her as smart, tough, and deeply caring. It was a big deal at a time when most shows followed the same old formulas and rarely gave the spotlight to black women. Nell stood out, not just because of who she was on screen, but because of what she represented. Even so, years later, Carter would say in an interview that the role didn't define her. It was just a job, not her real self. The story began with a promise. Nell's friend Margaret was dying and asked her to look after her family. After Margaret passed, Nell moved in with the Kaniskis, a white family in Glen Lawn, California. The father, Carl, was a police chief trying to raise 3 daughters on his own. Katie, Julie, and Samantha were each dealing with their own problems. In the very first episode, one daughter comes home with a black eye, another is caught shoplifting, and another is kissing a boy in the kitchen. The house was a mess emotionally, but Nell came in like a storm of calm. She wasn't just the housekeeper. She was more like a second mother. She helped them through their grief and reminded them of the love Margaret had for them. That role deepened even more in moments like the episode where they celebrated Margaret's birthday without her for the first time. Over the years, the show brought in new characters like Nell's foster son Joey, and after the actor who played Carl passed away in real life, the story shifted to New York, where Nell continued taking care of the family in a new setting. What really set the show apart was how it tackled serious issues that most sitcoms avoided. It didn't pretend life was all laughs. One episode showed Katie in the hospital, dealing with pain caused by birth control, a topic almost no other show talked about that openly back then. The show also touched on alcoholism, drug use, and even racism. Nell's character often faced moments that highlighted discrimination or brought up her past experiences with civil rights protests. One episode had Samantha protesting to save a historic site, and Nell shared stories of how she once protested when black people weren't allowed in certain places. These kinds of episodes gave the show a deeper message, and in 1984, it was even nominated for a Humanitas Prize for how it handled these themes while still being funny and heartwarming. The story of Gimme a Break started off strong, with a lovable cast, heartfelt moments, and a theme song fans couldn't stop humming. But everything began to shift by season 3, and not in a way people expected or wanted. First, the theme song changed. The familiar, catchy tune was replaced with something completely different. Fans who had grown attached to the original opening felt the rug pulled out from under them. Around the same time, Nell Harper's character started to look and act differently. She went from a warm, down-to-earth housekeeper to a sharper, more glamorous version of herself. It wasn't just a wardrobe upgrade. She felt like a whole new person. Some viewers were stunned. Others were disappointed. Then came Joey Lawrence, the cute new kid thrown into the mix. His arrival brought a totally different energy, and many believed the original heart of the show was slowly fading. The changes didn't stop there. When Dolph Sweet, who played Chief Kaniski, passed away in 1985, the show was forced to reinvent itself completely. His character was written off, and with him went the balance and emotional weight he brought to the series. The back and forth between Nell and the Chief had been a big part of the show's soul. Without it, the show started to drift. New faces were brought in, but the chemistry was never quite the same. Viewers could feel it. The magic was slipping. Then came the most unexpected twist. Midway through the 6th season, the entire show packed up and moved from Glen Lawn, California to New York City. Just like that. No gradual buildup, no real closure. One day, they were in Glen Lawn. Then, suddenly, they weren't. The explanation was rushed, and most of the original cast was dropped or phased out. Nell now had new responsibilities, raising Joey and his real-life brother Matthew, but the new setup didn't feel earned. It felt like a completely different show, with a new setting, new characters, and none of the charm that had made it special. Fans were confused, critics were harsher, and the ratings took a hit. Behind the scenes, Nell Carter had started to take more control over the direction of the series. She was a powerhouse of talent, no doubt, but as she gained more creative influence, the tone of the show changed. Writers came and went. The plot lines felt uneven. Viewers noticed the shift, and many didn't like it. What once was a heartfelt comedy about family and healing started turning into a show that didn't quite know what it wanted to be anymore. And just when things couldn't get more tense, Rosie O'Donnell joined the cast in the final season. But instead of bringing new energy, her arrival stirred up more problems. According to Rosie, Nell wasn't welcoming at all. She refused to call Rosie by her real name, using only her character's name on set. When asked about it later, Nell claimed it was about keeping the kids in character, but many believed there was more to the story. Some said Nell saw Rosie as competition, and the vibe on set became toxic. Nell Carter looked like she had it all: a loud laugh, a hit TV show, and a voice that could light up a stage. But behind the spotlight, things were falling apart fast. At the same time, she was making people laugh on Gimme a Break. She was secretly spending over $1,000 a day on cocaine. It had started back in her Broadway days, just a little fun, she thought, but by the time she was a household name, the addiction had taken over. Her friends had to break into her house one day and found her unconscious on the floor, wearing only her mink coat. That moment was the wake-up call, and she was rushed to rehab. But even after that, the cycle didn't stop. She kept going in and out of treatment while pretending everything was fine on screen. During this chaos, she got married to Georg Krenicki, a smart businessman from Austria. At first, it seemed like the fresh start she needed, but the addiction didn't stay quiet. Georg couldn't take it. Just over a year later, he walked out. Their marriage dragged on for years in name only, but in reality, it was already over. She wanted children badly, but heartbreak followed again, miscarriages, and pain she tried to hide. In the end, when everything else had fallen apart, she took charge and adopted 2 baby boys. No partner, no stability, just her determination to finally have the family she always dreamed of. Somewhere in the middle of this storm, she found something unexpected: faith. Raised Christian, Nell surprised everyone when she converted to Judaism, even though her Jewish husband didn't want her to. But she wasn't doing it for him. She studied hard, took it seriously, and even impressed the rabbinical court. Lighting candles on Shabbat gave her peace when nothing else could. Her 2 adopted sons were raised in the faith, and she held on to that spiritual routine through the worst of times. But the worst almost took her for good. In 1984, on a trip to London to see her friend Liza Minnelli perform, Nell tried to end her life. Sleeping pills and wine, it wasn't a cry for help. She was done. But Minnelli wasn't having it. She rushed her back to the US and got her into rehab at Hazelden, one of the top recovery centers. This time, it stuck. Nell didn't just get clean. She felt something shift. She said it herself. If it wasn't for God and Liza, she wouldn't be here. The treatment was brutal. Therapy, soul-searching, even scrubbing toilets. But she walked out of there alive and sober, saying she never touched cocaine again. Moreover, Nell had already suffered a heartbreak that stayed with her forever. In 1989, her brother Bernard died of AIDS. He wasn't just a brother. He was her rock, her support, her closest friend. He had always been the steady voice in her chaotic world. When she lost him, it shattered something deep inside her. She tried to hold herself together, moving back to New York, singing in nightclubs, trying to rebuild. But the grief never left, and that wasn't her only loss. Around that time, her grandmother was battling Alzheimer's. All of it pushed Nell toward faith. She converted to Judaism, spoke to God daily, and tried to find comfort in spirituality. But there were some wounds even faith couldn't fully heal. Her struggles didn't stop with grief or illness. Her weight had always been a sensitive subject, both for her and for the public. At one point, she weighed nearly 300 pounds. Producers worried about her. Audiences watched her appearance change. She used food the way some people use alcohol, to numb the pain, but she fought back. Her friend Liza Minnelli got her into rehab at Hazelden. There, she didn't just work on her drug problems, she worked on her eating habits too. She lost over 90 pounds while filming Gimme a Break, and stuck with a personal trainer afterward. By 1994, she had dropped under 250 pounds. It wasn't just about image. It was about survival. Nell also faced heartbreaking moments when trying to become a mother. At 16, she was sexually assaulted at gunpoint. She gave birth to a daughter, Tracy, who was raised by Nell's aunt. Later, as a successful adult, Nell dreamed of building a family, but she had 3 miscarriages, each one more painful than the last. So she turned to adoption. She adopted 2 sons, Daniel and Joshua, and loved them fiercely. But even that path wasn't easy. One adoption fell apart because the birth parents demanded money. Another failed when the pregnant woman living in her house changed her mind and kept the baby. Still, Nell poured her heart into being a mom. Her children were her purpose. That's what made it even more tragic that her youngest son was the one who found her body. Love and relationships were just as complicated. Her first marriage ended in divorce. Her second, to record producer Roger LaRocque, barely lasted a year. The timing was awful. She had just finalized her divorce, lost her grandmother, and was dealing with those life-threatening aneurysms. The marriage fell apart fast, and so did Nell's finances. She filed for bankruptcy twice, once in 1995 and again in 2002. Through it all, she kept her focus on her kids and her spiritual life. In her final years, she lived with Ann Kaser, who later got custody of her children. It was one of the few stable parts of Nell's later life. After years of heartbreak, health scares, and public struggles, she had finally found someone she could rely on. After Gimme a Break ended in 1987, Nell Carter didn't disappear. She went right back to the place that first made her a star, Broadway. The same stage where she once wowed crowds in Ain't Misbehavin' welcomed her back with open arms. And Nell didn't just return. She came back with fire. She played Dolly Levi in a 1991 all-black revival of Hello, Dolly, making the role her own with sass, charm, and a voice that could shake the walls. Then came 1997. That's when she lit up the stage again, this time as the nasty but hilarious Miss Hannigan in Annie. Even at just under 5 feet tall, Nell dominated every scene. Critics said her voice cut through the air like a steel drill. And they weren't wrong. But she didn't stop there. She kept pushing, joining powerful productions like South Pacific and the bold off-Broadway hit The Vagina Monologues, sharing the stage with stars like Audra McDonald and Tanya Pinkins. The same Nell who made people laugh on TV was now making audiences think, cry, and cheer in live theater. Meanwhile, she wasn't done with television either. Just a few years after Gimme a Break, she tried something new with You Take the Kids, a sitcom that only lasted a few weeks. It didn't take off, but Nell wasn't one to stay down for long. In 1993, she landed a recurring role on Hangin' with Mr. Cooper, where she brought warmth and sass to the character P.J. Moore. That gig ran for 2 years and proved she still had that TV magic. She kept showing up in surprising places, on Touched by an Angel, in animated shows like Spider-Man, even on Blue's Clues for the kids. Then, in 2002, right near the end, she popped up on Ally McBeal, stealing scenes once again, this time as Harriet Pumple, a quirky character only Nell could have pulled off. But while she kept shining in public, her private life was slipping through the cracks. She had made big money from Broadway and television, but by 1995, she filed for bankruptcy. The woman who once won a Tony and starred in hit shows now found herself drowning in debt. By 1999, her financial troubles were so tangled, they landed in the U.S. Court of Appeals. And it didn't get better. In 2002, just months before her death, Nell filed for bankruptcy again, this time owing over $2 million. It was heartbreaking. She was still working, still trying to provide, still planning to act in a new revival of Raisin. But behind the curtain, her life was quietly falling apart. In those final years, Nell found some comfort in a new kind of spotlight: game shows. In 1998, she joined Match Game and To Tell the Truth, bringing her sharp humor and big personality to a whole new crowd. These shows were lighthearted, fun, and gave her a space to just be herself. For a moment, it felt like the old days, her laughter filling the room, her spirit lifting everyone around her. But even then, she was quietly battling health problems and still wrestling with money issues. Nell Carter never stopped performing. Even in her final days, she was doing what she loved most: making people laugh. Her last film, Back by Midnight, was a comedy where she played a bold, sharp-tongued waitress, something that reminded everyone of her unforgettable charm from Gimme a Break. She filmed her scenes just weeks before she died, and although the movie came out 2 years later, it felt like her final gift to her fans. Even while working alongside comedy giants like Rodney Dangerfield and Randy Quaid, Nell held her own. She still had that spark, that timing, that fire. Nothing had faded. But behind the camera, her health had been quietly slipping. On January 23, 2003, Nell was found unresponsive in her Beverly Hills home. It was her 13-year-old adopted son, Joshua, who found her. The news stunned the entertainment world. At just 54 years old, Nell was gone. The official cause was arteriosclerotic heart disease, made worse by her long struggle with diabetes. And it wasn't the first time her health had nearly taken her. Back in 1992, she'd survived 2 brain aneurysms. She had spoken publicly about her battles with weight, with addiction, with the pressure of fame. Still, no one expected her to go so suddenly. Just days before, she was smiling, rehearsing, making plans. And that's the part that hits hardest. Right before her death, Nell was pouring her energy into a stage revival of A Raisin in the Sun. It was a musical version called Raisin, and she had been cast as Mama, the heart and soul of the story. It was a big role, one that demanded both power and grace, and Nell was ready for it. The show was set to premiere in Long Beach just 2 weeks later. She was showing up to rehearsals, bringing her strength, her voice, her warmth. She was building something beautiful, but she never made it to opening night. The production had to move forward without her. Carol Dennis stepped into the role, but everyone knew Nell was supposed to be up there. Her presence still lingered. That unfinished performance became the final chapter of her career, a reminder of how hard she worked, how deeply she loved her craft, and how much more she still had to give.